and welcome. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Racecar and Chill. My name is Stan, and today I'm going to walk you guys through the dreaded timing belt service on the best engine ever made, the Toyota 2JZ. Yes, you can ruin your engine by doing this job wrong. Yes, you're going to get frustrated. Yes, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. Stick with me, and I'm going to walk you guys through step by step, and it's going to be a great time. Now, the vehicle we're working on today is my turbo IS300. This service will be exactly the same for any 2JZ vehicle. The turbo stuff will not be applicable here, nor will it get in the way. But the very first step we're gonna start with is removing the radiator and fan assembly. But most importantly, you gotta drain the coolant first. I'm gonna take you guys under the car right now, and I'll show you where there's a drain plug on the radiator itself so you can do it without making a mess. Now we're gonna get under the car, and it's actually on the driver's side of the radiator. You'll see that's where the drain is. I'm not sure. So you can see the white little handle there. That's what you need to turn. I know my intercooler piping's in the way, but it's a tight fit. It won't be that tight on yours if you don't have an intercooler, obviously. But you turn that white little handle there. Be very careful. It's fragile, and if you break it, you'll need to replace it. But you need to turn it about a half a turn, and the coolant will start pouring out. And that way you can pour it out into a container like I did. And if your coolant is new, you can reuse it, and it won't end up all over the driveway and making a big mess. Now, after you've drained the radiator, you'll want to take the two mounting bolts off here. There's one here and one here. And then you'll want to take off the upper radiator hose and all of the harnesses and clips for the fans. There's two here. And then there's, it's right above that radiator hose. There's another electrical clip you need to take off for the, I believe it's the coolant sensor or the fan switch. But there's in total 3 electrical connectors and 2 hoses you need to take off. And also don't forget about the air hose that goes into the ECU to cool that as well. There we have it. Radiator comes out with all the fans and stuff. Super easy. Now, you want to make sure you close the drain before you forget, because what's going to happen is you're going to put it back in the car, you're going to be in a hurry, you're going to be excited, and you're going to fill it up, and the drain's going to be open, and you're going to piss coolant everywhere. So, pro tip, ask me how I know, close this drain as soon as you pull the radiator out. Set this aside. It's going to be not needed for a little bit. Okay, next you're going to want to get a 14 millimeter and grab it on the tensioner, and you just want to put some pressure down. Of course, you want to go the right way. And you'll see when I pull the tensioner, it takes all the slack off the serpentine belt. That way you can slip the belt off, and there you go. You'll notice the bolt doesn't come off, the tensioner just uses it for a torque. So set this aside. Now that you've got the radiator out of the way and the serpentine belt, now's a good time to spin all your pulleys and make sure their bearings are good. They should all spin freely. The only one that should make some sort of noise is sometimes the AC pulley, just because it rubs on the clutch, but even then it's not much noise. But look at my tensioner, listen to the noise it makes. That leads me to believe that it's either bad or it's on its way out, so I will be replacing that. But this is just some general maintenance. If you plan on keeping that car for a while, you should definitely replace this. But more importantly, before I take anything else apart, you want to set the engine to top dead center. Now there's one timing mark here, and there's one right on top of the cover too. Let me try to get this light to show it better. So you'll see on the cam itself, it's engraved. It's got a dash. Let's see, it's got a dash here, a dash here, and it's got a dot here. The dot is 15 degrees advanced, but this is top dead center. You want to line this up with this little hump right here. So they need to be lined up here. They need to be lined up on both cams. So same thing on this one. It's got a dash here. It's got a dot here. You want to line up the dash with the little indent here on the cover. That's how you know this cam's at top dead center. This cam's at top dead center. And you also want to align your crank. Now I've got an aftermarket fluid amper crank, so for whatever reason they decided to have the second line here be top dead center. So you want to line that up with the 0 here on the timing cover. If you've got the stock crank, it'll be 0. It'll say 0 or TDC. I forget what it says, but it says top dead center. It's pretty obvious.
Want to make sure everything is at top dead center before you take the car apart. That way when you put it back together, you can put it at top dead center and you don't have to worry about it. So I'm also going to mark the belt with a marker here, just so I can put the belt in the exact same place, just to double, triple check my work, because if you mess this part up, that's how you'll ruin your engine. You can, if your timing is off by a couple teeth, you'll have piston to valve contact and you'll be rebuilding the head and hopefully not the pistons as well, but possibly, but that's also a possibility. So I'm gonna put the camera down, I'm gonna mark my belt up real good before I take anything else apart, and then we'll keep it going. Now here you can see how I've marked up my belt, and then right above it you can see the indent here on the valve cover. So you want to make sure everything is lined up exactly. I also made a mark on the advanced, the 15-degree mark as well, just so I'm positive that my belt's going to be in the right place. And I did this on both cams. Same with this one, and I'm not sure, hopefully you can see it on the camera, but there's a little indent here. And then same with the 15-degree advanced, goes there. This is the most important part. If you mark your belt up correctly, you won't have any issues putting it back together and worrying about timing and ruining your engine. This is the part that scares everyone away. Okay, next is why one of the main reasons people don't want to do this job themselves. You have to take the crank off, or the crank pulley, I should say, harmonic balancer, whatever you want to call it. Now, it's a 21mm nut, and it's very, very, very tight because it literally uses the torque of the engine to tighten it. Mine's not going to be nearly as tight because this has come off and on. I've done this timing belt job a couple times, troubleshooting VVTI issues I've had with this engine. But the on your car, if it hasn't been taken apart recently, most likely this is going to be extremely tight to where you won't be able to get it by hand. Now, there's many different methods, and there's even specific tools made for this job. My recommendation is either go rent the tool or buy the tool. Use the proper tool, but if you're not going to do that, if you're as stubborn as I am and don't like to waste time, it's called the starter bump method. Now, essentially what you do is you get a 21mm socket set on here, and you wedge it with a ratchet and a breaker bar, and you wedge it to the ground. Then you literally go inside and bump the starter. You do not want to start the engine no matter what. You just bump it once, and it uses the torque from the starter to actually break this bolt loose. And once it's broken, it'll come out easy. But it's just very tight to begin with, so be warned. I've read a lot online where people are really hesitant to do the starter bump method. I've done it multiple times. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's the easiest, fastest way to do it. People will spend all day literally getting this bolt off. Don't even waste your time trying anything else. My recommendation, if you don't have the proper Toyota tool to pull this off, use the starter bumper method. Okay, now that we've got the engine at top dead center, all three, we've got both cams and the crank are all at top dead center, TDC. I've got a manual transmission, so I put the car in 5th gear. That way I know when I go and crank on the pull, or this crank bolt, I'm not going to turn the engine over because it's going to take a lot of force to do so. So the idea is to get this nut off without turning the engine over, because we have it set at top dead center and we want to keep it there the whole time. So 21mm nut is the crank bolt, and I'm hoping I can just pull it off. Oh, it's still pretty tight. Okay, let me get the breaker bar. Okay, we got the breaker bar, and this bolt should break loose now. There it goes. Now you'll notice as I cranked it, or as I was taking that bolt off, I did rotate the engine about, looks like 2 teeth or so. So I'm gonna rotate it back, and then hopefully the nut will still not be that tight to where I can get it back off. Okay, now we're back at top dead center. So hopefully this nut is still gonna be loose. Yep, there it goes. Now, you can see this is a big boy bolt, and that's why it's so tight. This bolt literally gets tightened by the torque of the engine. As the engine turns, the direction it turns in tightens this bolt, so it will be tight no matter. You won't be this lucky. Like I said again, look up online other ways to take the crank bolt out. The starter bump method is my method of choice. I've done it multiple times. I don't need to do it in this situation, but that's, once you get this bolt out, you'll need to get a pulley puller. There's different kinds, but it doesn't really matter what kind you need. You'll never be lucky enough to where you can just pull this out. It's always going to be way too tight. So you need another pulley puller to get this thing out of here. Let me show you what mine looks like. So this is a typical pulley puller. What happens is there's holes in this pulley here where you can screw these bolts in, and essentially you put them in like this. And once you get these bolts tightened up evenly, as you turn this, it pushes the pulley off of the crankshaft. So it's literally as simple as that. Watch and see how it gets done. Okay, now I've got the puller all set up now. Let me see if I can give you guys a better look. Now you want all three of these bolts, basically 1, 2, and 3, to be at the head. So now as I crank on this, I'm going to get a socket and crank on it. It will push this pulley away from the engine. I'm not able to get a socket in between the condenser and this bolt here because the space isn't so tight, so I'm going to end up having to use a wrench, old school. But as I wrench on it, let me see if I can show you guys. Get my wrench set up. You can see the crank move away from the engine. It's a very slow process. So let me see if I can get the camera set up and I'll time lapse it for you. Okay, so now as I wrench on it, you're going to see this pulley back away from the engine. So that's what you want to get at. Now, I've already got it started, but you'll see it keep coming all the way. You feel like it loose, and once it's loose, it just comes right out like that. Alright, so there's your crank. Okay, so after you got the crank taken off, next thing is your timing covers. So you'll have one cover here that I've already taken off, then you have this cover and this cover. They should be a 10mm bolt. Also, pro tip, if you don't have one of these magnetic bolt holders, do yourself a favor and get yourself one. Also, another pro tip, get yourself one of these. Okay, there goes the first timing cover. Second timing cover will kind of be a pain in the ass. So what you want to do is take the tensioner off next. You're going to have 3, I think 14mm bolts. Let's double check on that. Now, another pro tip, if you work on cars a lot, keep your shit organized so that way it doesn't take you 3 days to find the tool you're looking for. I'm going to have to stop the video so I can go find the socket that I'm looking for. Okay, 3 hours later, now that I found the socket I was looking for, let's get back to what we were doing. Taking this tensioner off. Drill, and there is your tensioner. Now again, remember my tensioner makes a noise I don't like. It sounds like the bearings in this pulley here are going out, or they already are out. So I'm gonna take it apart, but the nice thing is you don't have to replace the whole thing. You can just take this nut out and get just this bearing with new pulleys in it, because the tensioner is a big spring, like a really thick spring if you can see in there, and it's still good, and it's probably going to save me a lot of money just to replace the pulley. So we'll do that. And remember kids, when finesse fails, force shall prevail. Alright, So now you can finally take a look at your timing system. You've got the crank down there. Let me get you guys some light. So you got the crankshaft down there that actually turns the whole assembly. You got your tensioner right here on the left, the little green thing. Obviously mine is new. Like I said, I've done this job a couple times on this car. So I'm not going to actually be replacing any of this stuff. I'm just taking it out. I'm going to replace a small rubber seal, and I'm going to put it all back in. But anyway, you got the crankshaft pulley down there. You got the tensioner down here on the left, and it just goes up to your cams. And it's really a simple system. Now, I didn't take the water pump pulley off because it's I don't need to. Typically, when you replace the timing belts, you should also replace the water pump because you need to take all the timing stuff off to get to the water pump. So in the future, it'd be a shame to do all this work and cheap out on I think a water pump's like 60 bucks. To cheap out on a water pump, and then later on your water pump goes out and you have to redo this whole job just because you wanted to save 60 bucks once. It's going to cost you a lot more the second time. Through my experience with working on cars, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. Don't skimp out on parts. Don't buy the cheap parts either. It's not worth it. You're gonna end up having to do the job twice. And now I'm making videos because I've done the job so many times. I know this engine like the back of my hand, and I'm trying to teach you guys something. So don't skimp out. Now I was able to find an old tensioner that I had laying around, and I kind of just want to show you guys how it works. You know, so these are the bolt holes. So it gets mounted in the car just like this. And on top of here, there's another pulley that essentially puts tension on the timing belt. So when you buy them new, they come with this pin installed because they're pre-compressed, if you want to call it. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but there's one hole here, another hole here. Like I said, when you buy it new, this pin will be in here, and it'll be holding this little piece coming out down. So you install it with the pin in, and then once you get the timing belt in place and everything's good to go, you pull the pin and it puts tension on that. So because I need to take the tension off of the belt, I'm going to need to use a crowbar to compress the existing pin down. Then I'm going to put this pin in so I can hold the tension off while I get the belt off. Once I get the belt off and put it back in, then I'll just pull this pin out, and again we'll have tension. It's recommended to not let this arm go all the way out. So do it the way I'm doing it, essentially, not just unbolt this tensioner and then just on a vise clamp this in, because there's a little solenoid that goes in here, and obviously if you overextend it, you may break that seal inside of it. Again, a tensioner is not very expensive. You should definitely replace it if you're replacing a timing belt. It's just a pain in the ass to get to. It's one of those small parts that I think it costs like 30-40 bucks. Not worth saving the money to have to redo it later on, especially if your timing belt slips. So again, I'm gonna essentially compress this little arm here. I'm gonna put this pin in once it's in its compressed state, and that'll take all the tension off of my arm, or off of my timing belt. Okay, so I've got my crowbar in here, and I've got my pin in place. It's just loose in the back here. I know you won't be able to see it. It's all done by feel. I can't really see it either. But what I'm gonna do is put pressure on this crowbar here, and hopefully you'll see the tensioner move this way to take off pressure on the timing belt. And as I do that, I'm going to push the pin in. Yep. Now I got the pin in. I know it doesn't look like much. You don't actually get too much slack on it, but you'll see the belt is now loose. So I can go ahead and take the belt off, and I'll show you guys a little bit more on how the timing tensioner assembly works as well. And there goes the timing belt. You'll notice mine's blue. I use the Gates racing belt. I've had another belt slip in the past for me, so again, I recommend getting the nice stuff. Don't cheap out. If that slips, you could detonate your engine and have to rebuild it. But now you'll see the play here in the tensioner. Basically, or I'm sorry, this is the tensioner pulley. The tensioner, that little pin sits in the back here and pushes it up, and essentially gives it tension on the timing, gives the belt tension. So now it's loose because I again I compressed the tensioner. So you want to spin this, make sure it's good. Again, if mine's new, I would highly recommend replacing this with the tensioner and the water pump whenever you're doing this service, along with the crank seal, which is just behind this little crank gear here. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to be replacing that. It's been replaced. This engine was built 7,000 miles ago, maybe 8. It's a fresh seal though, so I will not be replacing that. And behind these cams, there's also another seal. I'm going to be replacing one of them because I messed with the VVTI solenoid and the cam cap up here, and I ended up changing the seating of that seal, so that seal now leaks. But everything else is new. It's got about 8,000 miles on it, so I'm not going to be replacing anything else other than the seal that I actually messed it up because I was working in a hurry. Now that I'm at the point where I'm ready to take the cams off, or the cam gears I should say, because the seal I need to replace is right behind it, I realized that I never took the valve covers off. So to take the valve covers off, it's a little more involved. It's nothing difficult, it's just nuts and bolts. But you're going to want to take the intake off, which in my situation, yours is going to be very different obviously since I've got the turbo set up. Yours is going to have a couple more connectors on this side. You'll have some coolant lines on this side coming out of the throttle body. Mine has been converted to drive-by wire, or I'm sorry, not drive-by wire, so it's mechanical, old school setup. So I'm gonna take the intake Y pipe off, and you only need to take it off to here. You don't need to take off the entire intake manifold, but I'll take this off, and then I'm gonna take the valve covers off, and then the ignition system is also in there. I don't need to take the ignition system out, but I'm going to just to show you guys anyway. It's super simple. So I'm gonna do a time lapse on this one. I don't think you guys need step-by-step instructions. You got 6 14 millimeters. They're either 14s or 12. I want to say they're 14s that hold the Y pipe on. Obviously mine's been painted. Yours is gonna be, if it's stock, it'll be just regular metal colored. But it's super simple. You essentially take your intake off. You'll take these bolts off, and then again, if you're stock, you're gonna have a coolant line here that's gonna need to come off, and the throttle cable and a couple sensors like that need to come off. There you have it, throttle body, Y pipe. Set that aside. Now one thing you don't want to mess up is this gasket right here. Especially if you run boost, you'll have a boost leak if you don't put that back in. So set that aside as well. So the next thing to get to these valve covers is going to be essentially taking off your breather tubes. These got to come off. And then you got 8 valve cover bolts on each side. They're 10 millimeters. So you've got 6 bolts and 2 nuts on each side. The nuts are in the very back corner in the middle, and on the sides as well. So we'll take that out. Now I like to stay organized because I get my nuts and bolts mixed up all the time. So put these in a separate bag than all of your other nuts and bolts. Most of these are different sizes, so they only fit in one location. However, the valve cover bolts will fit in a lot of holes, so keep track of them. The igniters are held in by a 10 millimeter bolt. Nothing special there. And it's as simple as pulling them off, and they all will have, the igniters will have a plug that goes onto the body harness, and one spark plug as well. So there's one igniter. When you pull these out, let me see if I can show you guys. Inside, there's a little spring. You want to make sure you don't lose that spring. Typically, if you were to be doing spark plugs, that's where you stop. So you can see you've got access to all of your plugs here now. These are the nuts I was talking about in the middle. They're a pain in the ass. Don't drop it. You're not going to find it if you drop it back behind the engine. Also, one thing to note, you'll notice that they are different lengths. The long ones, or I should say the short ones, go on the inside because they're going into the head. The longer ones, they just go to the outside and they hang through. So You want to put the long ones on the outside, the short ones on the inside. All right, 8 bolts are out, valve cover's ready to come out. You won't have this if you don't have a turbo car. My oil feed goes over the valve covers to feed the turbo with oil for lubrication purposes. So mine's gonna be a little bit harder of a pain in the ass to pull out than yours, but you will have this wire harness coming over the top. It's gonna be an old brittle plastic. It's gonna fall apart, so don't fret. I'd be shocked if you can pull the valve covers off without breaking this harness. It's just a bunch of plastic pieces. It sounds like it's breaking a lot of stuff. It's really not a big deal. As you can see, mine's got exposed wires. It's broken many times. So yours may be stuck. I had this valve cover off yesterday, so it's probably not going to be very stuck. If yours are stuck, you might want to get like a little, not a breaker bar, but a pry bar, and just kind of pry it up along the side. Once you break it loose though, on one side, the whole thing should pop off. And you do want to lift them up straight up because there's a stud back here that holds them in. So lift straight up. And it comes out just like so. Make sure to pull the gasket off as well. This gasket is new, it's been replaced. If yours has not been replaced, highly, highly, highly recommended to replace them. They're cheap. And when they leak, they make a mess all over everything. So just, again, it's worth doing. Do it right. You look how much work it took us to get to this valve cover. So just man up and spend a couple bucks to get new gaskets and don't have any leaks. Have a nice pretty engine like this that doesn't have any oil on the outside. Also, I learned how to powder coat not too long ago. So I've been powder coating stuff as I take it off. And I have time, so that's why mine are blue. Obviously yours are going to be stock colored, whether it's metal or black, I forget, but that's why mine are blue. Same thing with the next one, should just pop right off. Now's a good time to take a look and inspect everything inside. Again, this is a freshly built engine, so it's all fairly clean. Yours may look a little more yellow than this. I've taken apart my 220,000 or 210,000 mile other daily IS300, and it was not nearly as clean as this, so don't expect to see it this clean. If it is this clean, congratulations. But it's okay to have a little bit of, oil sludge and grime in there. Again, mine were pretty much yellow instead of chrome like they are here, so that's your valve train. Now, take the pulleys off. What you'll have to do is, the exhaust side is easy. It's just this one bolt here. And as you turn it though, you'll turn the whole cam. So the whole reason we took these cam gears, or the covers off, the valve covers off, is right here you'll notice that it's, let me get you guys some light. You'll notice that the camshaft itself is squared off. The idea there is so you can get a crescent wrench on there and hold the cam from spinning. So that's what you'll do. You'll need to get a big crescent wrench and you'll hold the cam from spinning while you take the bolt off on the front. Okay, so I got this crescent wrench here in place. And this is going to be a 17mm nut. You'll get a ratchet. Now the idea here is to not turn the cam, but take the bolt off. Sometimes it might be tight, sometimes it won't be at all, you never really know. But the idea is to pull with this, push with that, and hopefully you can break it loose without turning the cam gear. If you do turn the cam, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure you put it right back to top dead center, again with the alignment marks, before you end up taking the whole thing off. See, mine did turn a little bit, so I will turn it right back. There you go. You want to make sure it's lined up at top dead center before you take this nut off. Now, nut, nothing special, but you'll notice here that the cam can only go on one way because it's got this little pin that needs to go in. So, again, not the end of the world if you mess this up, but you make sure you line it up with this, and then this will be at top dead center with your timing mark up here. VVTI side, now this is basically gonna, everything I've done so far will be the exact same if you have a VVTI or non-VVTI engine. This is gonna be the only difference, and that's basically, it's still an extra step, but it's not much. It's definitely worth having VVTI because of all the benefits you get, especially in a boosted car, out of boost torque, quicker spool time. I don't need to go on about that, it's a whole other argument in itself. But It's going to be a hex head that goes in here. You take this off, and in there's also another bolt that you need to take off. So I will go ahead and, with the pry bar, basically, sometimes you might get lucky and this will just come off. Actually, I think I'm going to get lucky today. Help persuade it a little bit with a pry bar in the back. Kind of just be careful not to bend this cover too much. But there's a timing gear. Exhaust side, nothing special. Again, mine's powder coated blue because I learned how to powder coat. As you can see, it was not prepped very well, and that's what happens when you don't clean it enough and you try to powder coat something over it. The oil or greases bubble up under the powder coat and you get a shitty finish like that. Okay, again, same thing with the crescent bar or crescent wrench on the camshaft itself to keep it from spinning. This is, let's see, it's a 14 millimeter hex head, and that fits right in the VVTI gear. So same thing, you want to push with one arm, pull with the other arm. You'll notice that my gear turned, but the camshaft did not. Now that's VVTI. The VVTI gear in itself has about, I think it's 15 or 30 degrees worth of movement. Once you get this cap off, and now sometimes oil may leak through here because VVTI is run by oil. You'll see inside of there's another hex head that you need to remove. Let me see if I can show you guys. Get you some light. There you go. Another hex head you need to remove. So let me get the tool for that and I'll tell you guys what size it is. Okay, so this is, again, it's another hex head, but it's a 10 millimeter. And same thing, you're gonna try to keep the cam from turning. Now once this pulls out, you should be able to pull this cam gear off as well. From my experience, these are typically a little more stubborn than the intake side. This one will probably need a pry bar. And again, oil should come out of there. If you don't have oil coming out, you probably don't have VVTI or you're having issues with your VVTI. That 15 degree of movement that I just made is normal. Now what you can do is put this outside cover back on so it stops leaking oil everywhere. Now to get to your cam seals, they're right behind this black cover. So you want to take those out. They look like 10 mils. There you have it. Now, something that's unique to the turbo application, if your car is stock, you will not have these vacuum lines going through this. I'm not going to take them off just because they're a pain in the ass. There you go. These rubber pieces right here, you got one on each side. That's your cam seal. So it's probably going to be stuck in there. But yesterday, the reason this is leaking is yesterday I took the cam cap off, which is, as you can see, basically the seal sits along it and it's no longer sealing. So I'm going to replace that seal and put it all back together and we should be good to go after that. The best way I recommend to pull the seal out is with like a small screwdriver or a pick, and you just pull it out. Obviously be careful not to scratch this camshaft here. If you can't get it, you can take these bolts off, and there's two on the other side as well that are Allen heads that you can take off, and this whole top half of it comes off. That way you can get easy access to the cam seal. I've already replaced this new cam seal, so I'm going to go ahead and start putting this car back together. First thing that goes in would be the cover that goes here. And assembly is essentially the same steps as reverse. I will make a time-lapse video out of it. I'm not going to sit there and give you guys exact details and directions because I don't think you'll need them. If there's anything worth noting, and I'll stop the video and let you guys know. timing set. See the top dead center. Top dead center. Again, using the same holes I used, or the same markings I made on the belt last time. And then top dead center down here as well. You see it right there. Now, what you want to do is you want to turn the engine over by hand, just to be sure. So here's the pin I have on the tensioner down here. I'll pull the pin out and it'll put tension on the timing belt. But I need both hands to pull it because it's too tight. But as soon as you pull that pin out, you'll have tension in your timing belt and you can turn the engine over by hand. Oh, it's in gear. Duh! If you're trying to turn the motor over, make sure it's not in gear. Let's try that again. What the fuck, man? Oh. I need to go around one more time. Okay, I made 2 full revolutions on the crank. As you can see, the crank is back to top dead center. So is my intake cam. You'll notice it's got the slit right there, lined up with the timing mark up there. Same with the exhaust cam, slit right there, lined up with this mark here. That's it. I'm confident this engine will not grenade if I start it. My timing is set. I can keep going on and keep putting it together. Alright, I forgot to turn the camera on, but I just put the serpentine belt on. And if you can't figure out how to put the serpentine belt on, do not attempt this at home. Now, before we put our valve covers on, there's a couple of things you should note. On the cam side, right where it goes around the cam, right here, you're going to want to put 2 little dollops of black gasket maker. That way you don't get any leaks, and if it does, and especially if it were to leak here, you would think that your valve seals, your cam seals are leaking, and you don't want to have to redo everything we just did to replace cam seals when they're not really leaking. So I didn't put much on there, as you guys can see, just a little dollop here. Remember, there's 2 different lengths. One of them is a lot longer than the other one. You want to put the long ones on the outside of the engine and the short ones on the inside. Now, if I can give you any suggestions, do not hit these with the impact hard. They will break and you will have a bad time. my battery died on the camera. I don't know how far you guys got before it died, but we got the valve covers on. We got the ignition wires in. They're pretty simple. There's only one way to get them wrong. The igniter, very far back, cylinder 6. Igniter goes on cylinder 6. Spark plug comes into 1. The igniter goes on cylinder 2. The wire goes to cylinder 5. And the igniter goes to cylinder 4. And wire goes to 3. Basically, every single straight 6 engine is the same. If you fuck it up, you probably shouldn't be doing this. Next, all we have to do is to put on the Y pipe, which includes the throttle body. Again, for all you boosted guys, don't forget this little gasket here on this Y pipe. Even if you're not boosted, you need that gasket. Alright, intake is on. Last step, radiator. Grab that connector next to that hose. Yeah, we'll clip that into here once I get it low enough. Right here, this, I'm not sure if you can see it. Will you grab a light and just kind of face it towards me? So, you see how this has a little slide right here? You need to make sure that that goes into the slide, because if it doesn't, this wire will get caught in this pulley. Ask me how I know. So make sure that happens. Alright, she's all up, all put together. Alright, we made it. Thanks for watching. I know it was a long video. I tried to keep it short, tried to keep it fast, but there's a lot of material to cover. I hope I didn't skip too much and you guys kind of have an idea of what you're doing. There are many write-ups online that show you how to do the job. I like videos. I'm a visual learner. I like watching it get done. So I hope I was able to help you guys. If you found this video at all helpful or beneficial to you, please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. There's going to be a lot more DIY videos, and we're going to have a lot more good content coming to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.